Sleeping Beauty. The first moment. In a kingdom where golden wheat fields stretched to the horizon and crystal rivers sang their way to the sea, there lived a king and queen who had everything their hearts could desire, except for the one thing they wanted most. For many years, they had longed for a child, praying each night and wishing upon every star that crossed the velvet sky. One autumn evening, as the queen sat by the palace fountain watching the golden leaves dance in the breeze, a small green frog hopped onto the marble edge beside her. To her amazement, the little creature spoke in a voice like silver bells. "Your Majesty, do not despair. Before another year passes, you shall have the daughter you have wished for." The queen's heart leaped with joy and hope. True to the frog's prophecy, when spring returned with its chorus of birdsong and blooming flowers, the queen gave birth to a daughter so beautiful that sunbeams seemed to dance in her golden hair and starlight sparkled in her blue eyes. They named her Aurora, for she was like the dawn itself, radiant, pure, and full of promise. The entire kingdom rejoiced. Church bells rang from every tower, and the people danced in the streets, celebrating the birth of their precious princess. The king and queen, overcome with happiness and gratitude, decided to hold the grandest christening celebration their realm had ever seen. They invited the 12 most powerful fairy godmothers in the land to bestow their magical gifts upon the infant princess. The great hall was decorated with thousands of white roses and golden ribbons, and tables groaned under the weight of the finest delicacies. Each fairy godmother was presented with a special place setting made of the purest gold, studded with diamonds and precious gems. But in their joy, the royal couple made a fateful oversight. There was a 13th fairy, Maleficent, who had been forgotten, for she had secluded herself in a dark tower for so many years that people believed she was merely a legend. She was ancient, powerful, and had a heart as cold as winter stone. As the celebration began and the first fairy godmothers stepped forward to bless the baby with their gifts, no one noticed the sudden chill that filled the air, or the way the candle flames flickered as if touched by an icy wind. The middle journey. One by one, the fairy godmothers approached the golden cradle where Princess Aurora lay sleeping peacefully. The first fairy gave her the gift of unparalleled beauty. The second blessed her with a voice like an angel's song. The third granted her grace in all her movements. Others gave her wisdom, kindness, musical talent, and the ability to dance like poetry in motion. Just as the 12th fairy stepped forward to give her final gift, the great doors of the hall burst open with a thunderous crash. Dark storm clouds rolled into the room, and there stood Maleficent, her eyes blazing with fury and her black robes billowing around her like smoke. "How dare you not invite me to this celebration?" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "I too have a gift for the precious princess." The court fell silent with terror. The king and queen clutched each other's hands as Maleficent approached the cradle, her staff clicking ominously against the marble floor. "Listen well, all of you," she proclaimed, raising her staff high. "The princess shall indeed grow in beauty and grace, but on her 16th birthday, she will prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel, and die." The queen's scream of anguish filled the hall as Maleficent vanished in a swirl of green flame and black smoke, her cruel laughter echoing long after she had gone. But the 12th fairy, who had not yet given her gift, stepped forward. Though she could not undo Maleficent's curse entirely, she could soften it. "The princess will not die," she declared. "Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep that will last 100 years. Only true love's kiss can wake her." Desperate to protect their daughter, the king and queen ordered every spinning wheel in the kingdom to be destroyed and banned forever. Aurora grew up in the palace, surrounded by love and luxury, unaware of the dark curse that hung over her life. But the 3 good fairies, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather, knew the palace was not safe. On Aurora's christening day, they had secretly taken her to live in a cottage deep in the forest, disguised as peasant women. They raised her as their own niece, calling her Briar Rose, and she grew into a lovely young woman who was kind to all forest creatures and sang with a voice so beautiful that birds would gather to listen. On the morning of her 16th birthday, the fairies sent Briar Rose to pick berries while they prepared a surprise party. In the forest, she met a handsome young man who was actually Prince Philip, though neither knew the other's true identity. They fell in love instantly, planning to meet again that evening. But when Briar Rose returned to the cottage and learned she was really a princess who must return to the palace, she was heartbroken, believing she would never see her mysterious love again. At the palace that evening, as Aurora was left alone for just a moment, a mysterious green light appeared and led her up a winding staircase to a hidden room in the tower. There sat an old woman at a spinning wheel, Maleficent in disguise. "Come, child," the old woman cackled. "Try this spinning wheel. It's quite magical." Despite having never seen one before, Aurora felt drawn to touch the spindle. The moment her finger touched the sharp point, she pricked herself and fell into the prophesied sleep. The curse spread throughout the entire palace, and everyone, from the king and queen to the smallest kitchen mouse, fell into the same deep slumber. Around the palace, a forest of thorns grew so thick and high that it completely hid the castle from view. Many princes tried to hack their way through over the years, but the thorns were stronger than steel, and none succeeded. The last moment. 100 years passed like a whispered dream. Seasons turned, empires rose and fell, and the palace behind the thorns became nothing more than a legend whispered by firelight. The story of the sleeping princess became a tale told by grandmothers to their grandchildren, and many believed it was nothing more than a beautiful myth. But on the exact day that marked 100 years since Aurora had fallen asleep, a young prince named Philip rode through the forest. He had heard the legend from an old storyteller and felt compelled to see if it was true. As he approached the wall of thorns, something magical happened. The 100 years were complete, and the thorns began to part before him like curtains opening on a stage. Where others had found impenetrable barriers, Philip found a path lined with roses that bloomed as he passed. The thorns transformed into a garden of breathtaking beauty, as if the forest itself was welcoming him home. He rode through the gates of the palace and into a courtyard where everything was exactly as it had been a century ago. Horses stood motionless in the stables, their heads still bent toward their feed. Guards stood at their posts, their eyes closed in peaceful slumber. In the kitchens, cooks stood over pots that had long since gone cold, and in the great hall, courtiers remained frozen in the middle of conversations that had been interrupted by sleep. Philip climbed the winding staircase to the highest tower, guided by an instinct he couldn't explain. There, in a room filled with golden light filtering through stained glass windows, he found her. Princess Aurora lay upon a bed draped in silk and cloth of gold, her golden hair spread across the pillow like spun sunshine. Even after 100 years, she looked exactly as she had the moment she fell asleep, young, beautiful, and peaceful. Her chest rose and fell with the rhythm of dreams, and her lips were curved in the faintest smile, as if she was dreaming of something wonderful. Philip approached slowly, hardly daring to breathe. He had expected to find a dusty skeleton or ancient bones, but instead found a girl who looked as if she had just laid down for an afternoon nap. Something stirred in his heart, a recognition, a sense of destiny fulfilled. Gently, he knelt beside the bed and brushed a strand of golden hair from her face. "You're even more beautiful than the stories claimed," he whispered. Then, with the tenderness of true love, he leaned down and kissed her softly. At the touch of his lips, Aurora's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she looked confused, as if trying to remember where she was. Then her gaze focused on Philip's face, and her eyes widened with joy and wonder. "I know you," she whispered, sitting up slowly. "I dreamed of you. You're the young man I met in the forest." "And you're the peasant girl who stole my heart," Philip replied, taking her hands in his. "Though I see now you're much more than that." As they spoke, the sound of awakening filled the palace. Yawns and stretches echoed through the corridors as everyone from the king and queen to the smallest servant began to stir. The 100-year sleep was over, and life was returning to the palace like spring after the longest winter. Aurora and Philip were married in a ceremony that surpassed even her christening in its magnificence. The entire kingdom, which had mourned their sleeping princess for a century, rejoiced as if the sun had risen after 100 years of night. The three good fairies wept tears of joy, and even the forest creatures came to celebrate. On their wedding day, as Aurora walked down the aisle in a gown that seemed to be woven from moonbeams and starlight, she looked up at the stained glass windows where colored light danced like joy itself. She thought of the 100 years that had passed like a single night's dream, and of the love that had been strong enough to break the most powerful curse. The evil Maleficent, upon learning that her curse had been broken, flew into such a rage that she transformed into a dragon and battled Prince Philip. But love proved stronger than hate, and Philip defeated her forever, ensuring that Aurora would never again live in fear. As the years passed, Aurora and Philip ruled their kingdom with wisdom and compassion. They had children who filled the palace with laughter, and Aurora's singing voice brought joy to all who heard it. The spinning wheels were allowed to return to the kingdom, for their curse had been broken by love, and they once again served their proper purpose of creating beautiful cloth and warm clothing. On quiet evenings, Aurora would sit in her garden where roses bloomed in every color imaginable, and she would sing the lullabies that the three fairies had taught her as a child. Sometimes, she would touch her finger to her lips and remember the moment when true love's kiss had awakened her from her century-long sleep. The palace that had once been hidden behind thorns now stood open to all, its towers reaching toward the sky like a beacon of hope. And there, Aurora and Philip lived happily ever after, their love story becoming a new legend, one that reminded everyone that no curse is stronger than true love, and no sleep so deep that love cannot awaken the dreamer. The end. And so ends the tale of Sleeping Beauty, a story that teaches us that some things are worth waiting for, that true love can overcome any obstacle, and that even the darkest curses can be broken by the power of a pure heart. In Aurora's kingdom, love was celebrated above all else, and everyone lived with the knowledge that no matter how dark the night, dawn would always come.